Alrighty, so as I said earlier, today's meeting is basically two parts. The first part's going to be a climate change 101, where we're going to go over the science, impacts, and solutions to climate change. And the second part is going to be me presenting the CLIP program to you all, how it works, what it would look like in your school in this new virtual world, and how you can enroll your school into it with a teacher sponsor. To more formally introduce myself and the organization I work for, my name is Gabriela Rodriguez. I'm a program coordinator at the CLIO Institute. And if you haven't heard of the CLIO Institute before, it is a nonprofit organization based here in Florida that's dedicated to climate change education and advocacy. So we have many different programs, some that are directed for the youth like this one, some that are directed for different groups of people that all have the same goal of educating our communities about climate change so that they have the resources, the tools, and the empowerment to take action with their local governments and beyond, right? So there's a lot of stuff that the CLIO Institute does, and one of those things is the Climate Resilient Schools program, in which CLIP falls under. I'll go into more detail about that later on the call, but just wanted to give you some background and context as to who the CLIO Institute is. Again, I'm Gabby, and on the call, we also have Julieta, and I see Katrina. At the moment, I don't see another CLIO staff member, but if they join, I will make sure to introduce them. So Juli, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Julieta. I'm based in Miami, and I'm one of the coordinators of this program. So nice to meet you all.
And Katrina, I'm not sure if you can introduce yourself, but if you can, please do.
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Katrina Irwin. I'm also a program coordinator, and I'm based in Tallahassee. It's so nice to meet you all.
Awesome. So thank you both. Should you implement CLIP at your school, you'll be in communication a whole bunch with me specifically and Julieta. And if you happen to be in Tallahassee, Katrina also might be somebody that you come to communication a lot with as well. Alrighty, so with that said, all the introductions out of the way, I think we can get started. So Julieta, whenever you're ready, we can go ahead and start the Climate 101.
Thanks, Gabby. Thanks for that, patience. Can everyone see the full screen?
I can see it.
Great. So let's get started. Today's presentation is called Superheroes Among Us. As we mentioned before, this is our Climate 101 presentation that covers the science, impacts, and solutions of the climate crisis. If you've never heard about the climate crisis or don't know much about it, it's okay. We are all here to learn and to share with each other. Okay, let's get started. So when you ask someone who is a superhero, you typically get answers like comic book characters, right? We have Superman, the Incredible Hulk, and Spider-Man. In the coronavirus pandemic, we're also seeing the term superhero applied to more people, like our medical workers, our first responders, our truck drivers, and our grocery store employees. And one of the really cool things that's been happening recently is that we've seen a new class of superheroes emerge, and that's the youth. Each student comes from a unique background, and they bring their own skills to the climate movement. You know, much like the Justice League, students around the world are using their superpowers, the superpower of their voice, in the battle against a very, very powerful nemesis, which is the climate crisis. The images on the screen are pictures from September of 2019, when millions of students around the world joined forces, raised their voices, and demanded climate action and accountability from all of their local and national elected officials. The image at the top right is actually taken from Miami Beach City Hall, where CLIO hosted its Miami climate strike on that day. But what exactly were these students trying to accomplish? You know, why did they go on strike? And why were they insisting that the world can't wait much longer? And so to answer these questions, we really have to start at the beginning. And the beginning of the climate crisis is understanding what climate is. Climate is very different from weather. Weather refers to the conditions of the atmosphere over a short period of time. It can change within minutes or hours. So it can be rainy one moment and sunny the next hour. Climate refers to how the atmosphere behaves over a long period of time, which usually is measured over decades, but can happen over centuries and eons. The way that climate is regulated on the planet is called the greenhouse gas effect. And in simple terms, the greenhouse gas effect is the way that energy passes through our Earth's atmosphere. So the image on the screen, we have the sun radiating sunlight that passes through the atmosphere and enters the Earth, which is then absorbing all of that sunlight and using it. The Earth's surface then reflects back the sunlight as heat or infrared waves, which are what all of these tiny red arrows are. And some of it gets released back into space, and the rest of it gets absorbed in this atmosphere, which is the blue thin line surrounding Earth, and that helps keep our planet warm. Now, our atmosphere is composed of greenhouse gases, and their main purpose is to trap heat. Greenhouse gases include things like carbon dioxide and fluorinated gases. And in a normal scenario, the greenhouse gas effect is a good thing because it maintains a favorable temperature on Earth that's necessary for life. Without the greenhouse gas effect, the planet would be a frozen tundra. The problem is that human industry, like the rising of burning of fossil fuels, has increased the concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, and it's increasing the heat trapping capacity of our atmosphere. And so our planet is becoming warmer. So this chart is very important. Have you ever heard someone say that climate change isn't a threat, that the climate has always changed and that we're just in a cycle? This chart gives you the answer to that question. It measures carbon dioxide levels over the last 800,000 years. And as you can see on this line, it fluctuates up and down over hundreds of thousands of years. For millennia, atmospheric carbon dioxide had never been above this red line that you see on the image, which is 300 parts per million. And around the 1800s and 1900s, we started seeing increases of the carbon dioxide levels in our atmosphere. And in the 1950s, we actually crossed that threshold of 300 parts per million. This is where we are now, at the current level of 415 parts per million. That's the highest level that humanity has ever seen. And so there really are two takeaways from a chart like this. One is that yes, the climate varies naturally. There are different factors that contribute to this, like volcanic eruptions, solar activity, changes in the Earth's orbit and tilt. But that's not attributing to this change that we are seeing over the last few centuries. Human industry has pushed carbon dioxide concentrations beyond the natural cycle. So we can't accurately say that we're in a natural cycle anymore. And all of this warming is having consequences all over the planet. And we are reaching what's called tipping points. As our planet warms, so does our ocean. Oceans have absorbed about 93% of excess heat generated by greenhouse gases. This has also contributed to a decline in oxygen concentration, which affects all of the biodiversity that lives in the ocean. And we're also seeing issues with ocean acidification, which threatens coral reefs. And our coral reefs, when they're healthy, they're a great source of tourism, of recreation, of food, and they provide a lot of protection for our coastlines from storm surge during hurricanes. But unfortunately, this increasing heat in our oceans is decimating all of our coral reefs. And they are really stressed out and dying. It's really important to protect our oceans because they are our largest carbon storage system. They store carbon dioxide naturally. Unfortunately, warmer ocean water also acts as fuel for hurricanes. And so we are seeing stronger storms, heavier rain, bigger storm surge. The hurricanes that do form are moving more slowly and they're intensifying faster, which means that they're wreaking more havoc than before. The image you see on the screen is a map of Hurricane Michael. Hurricane Michael hit Florida in 2018. And as you can see in this part, right around the Gulf of Mexico, that water was 5 degrees warmer than average. And it allowed Hurricane Michael to strengthen 70% in just about a day and a half. When it made landfall in the northern part of Florida, it was the third strongest storm to ever hit the United States. And so I want you to take a moment and just put in the chat whether any of you have lived through a hurricane and how you felt. So tell me yes or no, and if it's yes, share an adjective about how you felt living through a hurricane. I'll give you all a few moments to do that. The answers are coming in. Seems like most of you have lived through a hurricane. I'm seeing words like stress, nervous, powerless, worried, scared, anxious. So these are very, very strong and negative emotions. And so extreme weather also has an impact on our mental health. People who live through hurricanes have often lost a lot of their livelihoods. They lost income. They may have lost family members. And so these are very real and human impacts that we're seeing as a result of this global warming. Another consequence of global warming is the melting of land ice. So land ice and thermal expansion is what contributes to sea level rise. Thermal expansion is the scientific term that explains the way that water molecules expand when they warm up. So warmer water takes up more space than colder water. In South Florida, we can expect at least 2 feet of sea level rise. And by 2100, 8 to 10 feet cannot be ruled out. For those of you who live in Miami-Dade County on the line, this is what Miami-Dade County looks like today. And this is what it would look like with 8 feet of sea level rise. I invite you to take a moment and find your community on this map if you live in Dade County. Find either your home, your school, places that you care about. How is it impacted by this potential sea level rise? And if you don't live in Miami-Dade County, do the same thing with this Florida map. Will your community be impacted with sea level rise? This is what Florida would look like with 8 to 10 feet. And speaking of South Florida, we also have a problem of saltwater intrusion. South Florida gets most of its drinking water from under the ground, like the Biscayne Aquifer. As sea level rises, seawater from underneath and from the east push against the fresh water that is under the ground and contaminates it. The fact that South Florida rests on a bed of limestone makes this worse. This is what limestone looks like. And if you look closely, it has a lot of holes, it's very porous, and it looks similar to a sponge. This allows water to flow very easily through it. So limestone is a very good purifier, but it also makes it easy for seawater to enter our freshwater supply. And we expect that Miami's drinking water is going to become more expensive as sea level rise increases. And this is unfortunately going to disproportionately impact vulnerable communities. The forests on our planet and other places of vegetation also are carbon storage systems, just like our oceans. They absorb massive amounts of carbon dioxide through photosynthesis and other processes. They purify our air, which is why our forests are known as the lungs of the earth. It's really important for us to protect our forests in terms of air quality, as well as biodiversity and all the other benefits that our forests bring. About a quarter of global greenhouse gas emissions come from agriculture, forestry, and other land uses. And this is a consequence of us not protecting our forests as we should. In fact, the main reason of tropical deforestation is the production of beef. Animal agriculture is also doubly intensive because it emits a greenhouse gas called methane. And so not only are we cutting down our trees to make room for agriculture as well as urbanization, we are also emitting methane, which is a greenhouse gas, through animal agriculture. Beef production is actually contributing to wildfires all over the world. And as we saw in the Amazon recently, it was largely due to clearing forests to make space for cows. Another thing we want to talk about is extreme heat. We are going to feel the heat as global warming intensifies. Extreme heat increases the impacts like stroke, kidney disease, respiratory disease, cardiovascular disease, and cerebrovascular failure. This is a chart showing danger days. And what this means is a heat index above 105 degrees. Heat index measures temperature as well as humidity. And this indicates that by 2030, about a third of the year, we're going to see heat index above 105 degrees in Miami. Orlando fares a little bit better, but we have about 114 days of heat index above 105 degrees. And in Tampa, 121 days. So take a moment to put in the chat how old you will be by 2030. And when you do, we'll share that. So how old will you all be in 2030? Okay, I see a lot of answers of mid-20s, between 25, 26, 27, as well as a couple of teachers. So this is in your lifetime. We are going to see climate impacts in your young adulthood. And if there are any athletes in the group, we're also going to be seeing a rise of heat-related illnesses. Did you know that among high school athletes, heat-related illnesses are the leading cause of death or disability? There are a lot of people that are at risk with extreme heat. Among them athletes, as well as all the people who work outside, our farmers, our engineers, our construction workers. A warmer world poses great risks for all people. Okay, pop quiz. What's wrong with this picture? Tell me in the chat what sticks out to you about this picture. For a little bit of context, this is a bus stop in Miami-Dade County. So tell us in the chat what you see. All right, so I do see two major buckets of insight. Some of you are pointing out the pollution, and yes, littering is very terrible and we shouldn't do that. And some of you have also pointed out the lack of shade. The lack of shade poses a health risk for people who rely on transit. So this really becomes a social justice issue where some communities will be impacted more than others. Utility bills are also expected to get more expensive, and transportation can become more deadly as people wait in the hot sun. Did you know that the US Department of Housing and Urban Development doesn't require air conditioning units in affordable public housing? We have many families in Miami-Dade County, as well as across the state of Florida, that don't even have access to air conditioning. So it does become a health threat. And the last impact that we want to talk about is eco-anxiety. Eco-anxiety is also referred to as climate distress, climate change anxiety, or climate anxiety. But essentially it refers to anxiety about the global climate crisis and the threat of environmental disaster. And I've worked with a lot of students in Miami-Dade County and throughout South Florida, but many of you in other parts of the state might relate. And there are students that are really suffering from eco-anxiety. But we want to let you know that you are not alone. And we can channel those emotions into civic engagement and really join the movement to become part of the change. One of the ways that we can overcome eco-anxiety is really being activists and being a part of that solution. So we invite you to come into the climate movement. And with that, we are going to take a small break. We're going to launch a science poll. It's going to be one question just to make sure that you are understanding everything that's being explained so far. So Gabby, if you could launch that poll, we'll give you about 30 seconds to answer it. And then we're going to do a short activity. So let us know, true or false. Humans would be better off without the greenhouse gas effect. Okay, I'll give you about 5 or 6 more seconds. Okay, Gabby, you can close the poll. I am seeing about a 2/3 split. 2/3 of you said false. Humans would not be better off without the greenhouse gas effect. And about 1/3 of you said true. So remember, the greenhouse gas effect helps to keep our planet warm. In and of itself, it is a good thing. It prevents our planet from being a frozen tundra that wouldn't sustain life. What's important to understand about the greenhouse gas effect is that it's intensifying. The greenhouse gas effect is becoming more powerful. It's trapping more heat and it's making the planet warmer because we're releasing more greenhouse gases into the atmosphere as a result of burning fossil fuels like oil, coal, and gas. So false, humans would not be better off without the greenhouse gas effect. Okay, so we can stop sharing those results. And now we're going to ask you to share in the chat. So since we are on the theme of presidential administrations, we have a question for you all. If you were president for a day and you had $5 billion to spend, you have to spend it all on that one day, which issue would you tackle and why? I'll give you about 45 seconds and put it in the chat. Pick an issue and let us know why you think that deserves $5 billion. Right, so we have issues of sea level rise, extreme heat, ocean acidification. Which issue of the ones on the list would you tackle first? Okay, we're already starting to see some answers. We have social justice and equity. We have a couple of those. Extreme heat, sea level rise, health impacts. Someone said the foremost responsibility of a president is to protect people, which includes their health. We have extreme weather events, a couple of those. More extreme heat, land use. Ocean acidification, and biodiversity. Extreme weather, because it could save money in the future. That is very true. Saltwater intrusion. Okay. Seems like most of them have been addressed except for the food, water vulnerability, unless I didn't see it. But really, there is no right answer. And as you're going to start to see, the more you learn about the climate crisis, it's all interconnected. And the more that we incorporate climate action into all of these decisions, as well as other components of policy, the more we're going to start to see, great benefits for everybody involved. So thank you for sharing. I hope that you bring that passion into the next part and if we start to explore our climate solutions. So before we explore the solutions, let's really just take a moment and think about why this matters. Why is the climate crisis and action so urgent? Well, one answer is because we learned that climate action benefits the whole world through things like clean water, clean air, livable cities, green jobs, energy independence. Everyone can benefit from climate policy. And so this last section of the presentation is going to be about our solutions. And our solutions are separated into two categories. We have mitigation and adaptation. Mitigation addresses the causes of climate change, whereas adaptation adapts to the effects of climate change. So one example of mitigation would be renewable energy, so that we don't release fossil fuels from the beginning. And one example of adaptation are living shorelines, which protect us from the impacts of sea level rise. So this graph to the left shows the largest emitters of greenhouse gases. And if you can see closely, you see China is the #1 emitter of greenhouse gases, followed by the United States, the European Union, India, etc. But the next image shows global disparity in carbon footprints by country per person. And what this indicates is that the United States per person releases more greenhouse gases than a resident of any other country in the world. And this isn't to place the blame on a particular country or another. It's to show that we all have to work together. We all have to take responsibility for our pollution and our contribution to this climate crisis. And there are two ways that we're trying to do that. One is through something called the Paris Accord, which was an effort among 189 countries around the world to limit this increase in global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. For those of you who know in Fahrenheit, we have 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit. And this is by 2050, over the next 30 years. Now, I know that 1.5 degrees doesn't seem like a lot, but on a planetary scale, it is a lot and creates tremendous impacts. A second way that we're trying to bring climate policy forward is through something called the Green New Deal. Now, in 2019, the Green New Deal was introduced in Congress as a plan for tackling the climate crisis only in the United States. And their goal is to achieve net zero by 2050, which means that whatever amount of greenhouse gases we release into the atmosphere, we take out that same amount. It also aims to fix societal problems like economic inequality and racial justice. So keep an eye out for those two terms as you start to explore climate policy. Right, your food. Your food is a huge way to put climate action forward in your life. As we discussed before, beef production is the #1 reason for deforestation. Incorporating more plants into our diets can benefit our health and reduce the need for deforestation. Food waste is also a big problem in this country. In the United States, we throw away about 40% of the food that we produce. This happens at multiple places throughout the food system. And so reducing that helps reduce food from going into our landfills, which releases methane as it decomposes. Now, reducing food waste can be done through like meal planning, eating leftovers, and purchasing what's called ugly food, which is food that isn't fit for the grocery stores in terms of aesthetics. Composting is also a great way to mitigate climate change. Part of your climate resolutions, a couple of you mentioned composting. What it does is it turns food scraps into nutrient-rich fertilizers that can be used to grow more food. And then lastly, we want to advocate for systemic changes. This is a problem that affects a lot of people. And so not only do we want to make changes on an individual level, we also want to make changes on a policy level. And this includes advocating for composting systems so that the whole city has access to composting. We can increase farmers markets to have more access to local food and incorporate more regenerative agriculture. Your purchases can also be catalysts for climate action. Reducing consumption is great for the environment and it's free. So buying less is the beginning of that. Participate in sharing economies where people share the items that they need. And then when you do buy, try to buy secondhand whenever possible, local, ethical, and sustainable products if you can, and opt for reusable over single-use products. We can reduce our plastic consumption, but we also have to be respectful of people's different access and abilities to reduce their plastic. As consumer activists, we really can advocate for more accountability from companies so that they can make those changes on a systemic level. And we can advocate for plastic bans in our cities so that we don't have many cities producing and releasing single-use plastics into our waste stream. Our energy systems are also a big opportunity for change. Solar energy is a great option here in Florida. We're known as the Sunshine State. So these two images compare parking lots in Miami, Florida versus parking lots in Atlanta, Georgia. And what you see is a more efficient use of space. They're using solar panels to generate electricity, as well as provide shade and protection for the cars underneath. Now think about all the places that we could advocate for policy changes and bring solar energy on a creative level. Now there are also many ways to reduce energy consumption at home, from turning off the lights or washing your laundry in cold water. And I encourage you to incorporate as many as you can into your lifestyle. And as we close, we ask you to use the power of your voice. Gabby's going to introduce CLIP in just a moment. But CLIP, we advocate for climate action. We contact our elected officials. We educate our peers and families and create meaningful change in our schools and our communities. This is a really, really great program, and we need you to bring your voice, to bring your skills, to bring your superpowers so that we can have the strongest generation of climate superheroes yet. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Huli. Thank you for that amazing presentation. I hope that all of you, whether you knew a whole lot about the issue or not, learned a thing or two from Julieta's presentation. All right, so this next part is going to be, as Huli mentioned, me introducing the CLIP program to you. And what you just saw in Julieta's presentation will connect back to actually what I'm talking to you about. So let me set up my screen. All righty. Good. Oops. All right, I think we're good. So thanks again for coming today. Part of the reason many of you did was to learn more about this program. And if you haven't heard about this program and you're just joining because you heard we would be giving Climate 101, that's even better, because this is an incredible program that we've been working on for the past nearly 2 years, and we're excited to roll it out for its second year and expand it to more schools, new schools like yours. So the Climate Leadership Information Program, otherwise known as CLIP, is a component, it's a sub-program, if you will, under something called Climate Resilience Schools, which is the Clio Institute's effort to increase the understanding of climate change within students around Florida. So we do that by working with teachers, some of them who are on this call today, through a teachers network where we give them the resources and tools that they need to integrate climate change into their classrooms. We do that by giving climate change 101s in different classrooms, just like Julieta just did for you all right now. And we also do that through this program called CLIP. CLIP in its simplest terms is basically a club about climate change. So some of you might be familiar with the Club HIP, the Health Information Project, which kind of has a similar idea, a similar model, where basically the whole point about CLIP is to educate your peers in your school about climate change and to empower them to take action. That is what you would be doing as a group of CLIP on your campus in your high school. Just for a little bit more context, because it's a really wonderful story, the way that CLIP came to life is because of a student in Miami-Dade County who went to Palmetto Senior High School. She graduated last year. And she came to the Clio Institute and said, you know, I'm learning so much about climate change from you all, but not in my classrooms, whether that be because the teacher doesn't have the resources to teach it or the capacity to teach it, or it's just not being, maybe she felt like it should have been touched upon more within her AP environmental classrooms. When she came to us with that issue, we developed a program around it to make sure that students, until there is better science standards, they can learn about climate change in their high schools. And the wonderful thing is that this is a club fully led by students for students. And that's important because we know that when we're talking about climate change in our communities, people like to hear it from people they can relate to. That's the whole magic of this peer-to-peer education model. So that's the gist of CLIP and the mission of CLIP. Now I'm going to tell you what CLIP actually looks like and how it works. So CLIP is again, a program that we offer to high schools that extends in the second half of the school year. So from January right now to May. And this year, given the circumstances, this program will be held completely online. And this is the timeline of how that works. So in January, your school attends a climate presentation, which is essentially what you are doing right now. This is where you are now. You as a student, as a teacher, different students from your school that came got a climate presentation. So now you have the baseline knowledge of climate change. And that's very important because when February rolls around in a few weeks, should you commit to starting CLIP at your school, you will enter what's called the certifications process, which is a mandatory requirement of CLIP. What this means is that every single student in your club who wants to work on CLIP has to become a certified climate speaker. That means that you have to prove that you can actually teach about climate change, because that's the whole point of CLIP, to teach your students, your peers, about climate change. So what you would do is you would go through a process with us, the Clio staff, where you would give a presentation about climate change to us. We make this really easy though, because the presentation that you have to give is actually a shortened version of the presentation you just got. So it's not going to be as long as what Julieta gave you. It's about 20 slides. And you would give that to us in 15 minutes. If you do it well, you are officially a certified climate speaker. Your club is made of certified climate speakers, and you can all start what we call peer-to-peer presentations, which is the next requirement of CLIP. You'll see under the February box. For your CLIP program to be completed at your school, your group is required to give 2 presentations about climate change on your campus. These presentations must be given by students to students that are not in CLIP, students that haven't learned about climate change, haven't received your presentation. That is the whole model of CLIP, where you're fostering this peer-to-peer education, where you as a student are teaching your fellow peers about the climate crisis. So your group must give 2 of these presentations on campus. Doesn't mean that everybody has to give one, it just means that your group as a whole has to do it. Then when you roll into March, you have to continue your presentations. If you haven't done the minimum requirements yet, maybe you have done 2, but if you haven't and your group wants to give more presentations, you can feel free to do more or give it to a local library or your neighbors, anybody else in your community at large. Then in March, we're going to also be offering a storytelling workshop, which is not a requirement of CLIP. It's going to be an optional event that you can attend, which we highly encourage that you attend, because we've noticed that students and people in general, when talking about climate change, they want to have a climate story. They want to talk about how climate change has personally affected them when they are teaching others about the crisis. And it's just a more effective way to also talk about climate change, because when you connect those values, it works, right? So that workshop is going to be all about how you can do that and how you can augment your communication skills so that you can implement storytelling within your conversations about climate. Then in April, this is one of the major requirements of CLIP as well. We have the Earth Day campaign. So in April, we have what you probably know as Earth Day, and Earth Day falls within Earth Week, which is like mid-April. And as in the CLIP program, what we have our CLIP groups do across these different schools in Florida is plan a campaign around Earth Week. So your group would choose a topic that falls under climate change, maybe it's sea level rise, food waste, and you would plan a campaign, whether it's virtual, on campus, whatever works for your school circumstances in these times, where you educate your peers about that topic and you empower them to take action. And then in May, the last requirement of CLIP is the loved ones conversations. So in that requirement, every student in CLIP is required to give a climate change presentation to somebody that they love. It can be a parent, a friend, a neighbor, a sibling, an aunt, an uncle. And then afterwards, they would give a report of the conversation they had with that person, how that experience went talking about climate change with somebody that they loved. And then finally, another optional event will be the CLIP graduation, where we will essentially celebrate you and your efforts. All right, so with that being said, that is the timeline of how CLIP works and how it's going to work over the next few months online. And to kind of streamline communications and be more organized, we're offering a CLIP coordinator position. This is a leadership and volunteer opportunity for students. So if you're somebody that this is really your thing, you really want to explore climate change education and advocacy, and you want to take leadership on it, you want to put on your resume, you want to learn more about it, it's a great thing for college applications, this is something you might want to look into. Essentially, you would be the person that leads and guides and supports your group at your school. So supporting, guiding, and motivating your group activities, keeping track of reports, and attending meetings with us at CLIO so that we can stay up to date as to how your school is doing. So if this is something you're interested in, please advise your teacher sponsor by the end of the week. As we work with you all and establish CLIP in your schools, we're going to be reaching out to teachers to identify who would be the CLIP coordinator of your club. Okay, and then I kind of already went through this, but just to recap, the program requirements of CLIP is 1, certifications. So everybody in your club needs to become a climate speaker. 2, you need to have monthly group meetings as a club internally, just like you would kind of have for any other club at your school. 3, CLIP coordinator meetings. So if you would like to be a CLIP coordinator, you would be required to meet with us, CLIO staff, to update us on how your school is doing and anything you might need, ask any questions, ask for any guidance. And then additionally, the other requirement are those 2 presentations I spoke about, the Earth Day campaign, and then the loved ones conversations, which is a requirement of every student, not the club as a whole. Again, I'd like to stress that all the activities this year are virtual. We know that some schools, especially around the state, are doing things differently. Some of you might be in school, some might be out of school, but anything that CLIO does, all of our events, the resources we provide you will be done virtually. And then finally, if this sounds awesome to you and you want to get started, which I hope all of you will, you can start CLIP at your school this school year. Again, I'd like to stress that this is a program for high schools, not any younger. And if it interests you and if you have a teacher who's willing and able to sponsor CLIP, email me as soon as you can. I've already come into contact with many of you, but regardless, email me, let me know your school, the teacher, and copy that teacher on the email so that we can get started. And we will follow up with you with all the necessary information for you to get started on CLIP over these next few months. All right, so that's the end of my presentation. We have about 15 minutes left, a little bit over. If anybody has any questions about anything, whether it was the presentation or what I just went over, now is the time to ask. You can put them in the chat and I can answer out loud. So, and if you don't have any questions, that pretty much wraps it up. So if you feel like you would like to leave, that's totally fine. And we totally appreciate you coming here. I'm gonna go ahead and answer Penny's questions. Can the climate presentations simply be to a class size of students? Yes, so the climate presentations that you would give on campus can be in a classroom size, it could be in a Zoom classroom, it could be an assembly, although I don't know if that's something that exists right now, but it could be any size of students. It just needs to be to a group of students at your school. I hope that answers your question. If anybody else has questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Do you have more information on the Dream Green competition architecture project? I'm not sure exactly what you're referring to. I'm assuming you're referring to the organization Dream in Green and the different competitions they do within schools. Julieta, I don't know if that rings a bell for you in any way.
No, so Dream in Green is one of CLIO's partners and we collaborate on a lot of projects. I haven't heard anything about them, but if you do need a contact at Dream in Green, we'd be happy to connect you.
Yeah, so if there's any way we can help you, feel free to email me, Jesse. I'll put my email in the chat. And we can move from there.
I received a personal question from Leonette. Is there only one CLIP coordinator per school? Yes.
Only one clip coordinator per school. And again, about that clip coordinator position, the idea is that that student would support and guide the group, and they would meet with us among other clip coordinators representing their schools. So we would hold monthly meetings with those clip coordinators and just be updated on their school's needs, check in with them on their requirements and whatnot. All right, can multiple students give presentations? Like how HIP has a president and a sponsor, but they have students giving multiple presentations. Do you mean, I'm assuming you mean that can one presentation be given by more than one student? The answer to that is yes. So a climate presentation in this program can be given by 2 students or 1 student. It can be done like in pairs like that, if that's what you're asking. If not, definitely clarify. And then on that note, I'll also stress again that the peer-to-peer presentations doesn't mean that every single student in your group needs to give a presentation. It just means your group as a whole needs to give 2 presentations, whether that's given by just a few of the kids in your group. Okay, Anna asks, should we ask our teacher about it if they would like to be sponsored? Yes, Anna, that is step 1. So the majority of you here probably already have a teacher you've spoken to them about this program, but if you haven't, don't worry, don't stress, willing to work with you. So Anna, definitely identify a teacher in your school who would be interested in this program, and this meeting will be recorded and put on YouTube, and I will share it with you. So if the teacher is like, what is this program? What is this even about? You can share this meeting with them as if they attended it themselves. So yeah, that's definitely step 1. Okay, Allison asks, how do clip coordinators know when to meet in CLIO monthly meetings? We haven't chosen specific dates yet. We wanna kind of first identify all these clip coordinators and then ask them what dates and times works best for them. So that's TBA, Allison, we don't know yet, but they're gonna be after school, of course, on a weekday. And we're just gonna move forward from there and see who the coordinators are and like what dates and times works best for them. Okay, Leonette asks, if a student is already a certified speaker, is she required to complete the certification again? No, so if she's a certified speaker from the CLIO Institute, she is not required to go through that process again. So Leonette, as a teacher, I would ask that you provide me a list of all the students that are interested in this program, and it would be extremely helpful if you could also tell me who's certified and who needs to be certified. All right, so next question. In terms of the procedures the teachers will need to follow, will that information be sent out in the next few? Yes. So everything that we just went over was, the presentation I gave was honestly like a brief overview of everything I will be sending you via email. So you will receive an email with everything you need to get started on this program and to get started on certifications. And I'm assuming that you don't have the teacher on the call with you today, so that I need to know like kind of more as to what school you go to and whatnot, but to answer your question, everything will be sent out by next week, yeah. Michelle asks, how many schools can enroll? So not sure what you mean by that. Any school that is a high school in Florida can enroll. I hope that answers your question, Michelle. Again, I'll be sending out all this information within the next week, and I'm getting your emails from the Zoom registration. So if there are other people that you want to receive this information or a better email possibly, make sure to reach out to me and let me know so I can include you in our list.
I see a question about Zoom. Yes, the presentations can be given through Zoom.
I think I saw Sophia raised her hand. I'm not sure if you have a question, Sophia, but if you do, feel free to come off mute and you can ask, or you can put it in the chat. So Julieta and I will be able to stick around until 4 to 5:15 if anybody still has questions. When will students receive the training to be certified? So the certifications process for your school would, so ideally the students that are interested in being in your group at CLIP would have attended this meeting. And if they didn't attend, they need to watch this recording. And then that will show them how the presentation has been given. That is essentially the training. And then once we have a list of those students that you know want to be certified at your school and start CLIP, I would need that list. And then we'll start communicating with them over the next few weeks as to how, practicing this presentation, giving them the actual slides so they can practice it, and then they'll meet one-on-one with us at Clio to give the presentation and be certified. So I don't have like an exact date, but it is the first step to establishing CLIP at your school. So we would start this process within the next few weeks. We just definitely need a group of students at your school who are interested in doing this. Penny asks, how many students is the minimum? 2, because you need a CLIP coordinator and you need a group. There really is the minimum would be a group, whatever makes a group, which would be 2 to 3 students. Lena asks, is there any maximum? No, there is no maximum. The only thing that would reach our capacity is obviously like certifying dozens and dozens of kids might not be feasible. So we would ask for your help in doing so as a teacher and as a teacher sponsor, of course. So on that note, also for any teachers on the line, in addition to the information that I went over today, which would be sent to you, you would also separately get a document that lists out the expectations of being a teacher sponsor. So yeah, the minimum would be whatever makes a group, and the maximum, there is no maximum. Does this teacher sponsor need to be certified too? No, that is no. Julieta, I don't know if you want to add to that. The answer is no, because if you were to help us certify other students, we would give you the rubric to follow, just to make sure that they are presenting the information as they need to.
Correct. Teachers are not required to be certified speakers. However, we do welcome you if you'd like to be one. And we have had teacher sponsors of this program become certified alongside their students.
Awesome. Lynette certified last May. Perfect. That's even better. Great. And of course, should you have any questions that you can't think of right now or don't want to ask right now in a group, by all means, feel free to email me. All right, so we're here to stick around until whenever, until 5:15. Should you have any questions? If you don't have any questions, we aren't presenting any more new information, so feel free to exit the room. If you want to hear the answers to the questions, feel free to stay. But anyone who's leaving, thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for joining. We'll stay on the line.
Thank you, Lynette. Thank you all so much. Bye. Thank you.